All right, cool. It is way easier to download a 3-hour video than it is to download a 6-hour video. Let's continue. Many of these women recognize the exploitative nature of their jobs, identifying ways they are subjected to various unnecessary humiliations and degrading encounters. This recognition may be the most salient feature in a situation where a black woman may also have good feelings about her white employer. Judith Rollins' book, Between Women, is a useful and insightful discussion of these relationships. Whether talking with black domestics or non professional black women, I find that the overwhelming perceptions of white women are negative. Many of the black women who have worked as servants in white homes, particularly during the time when white women were not gainfully employed, see white women as maintaining childlike, self centered postures of innocence and irresponsibility at the expense of black women. Again and again, it was pointed out that the degree to which white women were able to turn away from domestic reality, from the responsibilities of childcare and housework, whether they are turning away for careers or to have greater leisure, is determined by the extent to which black women or some other underclass group are bound to that labor, forced by economic circumstances to pick up the slack, to assume responsibility. I found it ironic that black women often critiqued white women from a non feminist standpoint, emphasizing the ways in which white women were not worthy of being on pedestals because they were shiftless, lazy, and irresponsible. Some black women seemed to feel a particular rage that their work was overseen by white women whom they saw as ineffectual and incapable of performing the very task they were presiding over. Black women working as servants in white homes were in positions similar to those assumed by cultural anthropologists seeking to understand a different culture. From this particular insider vantage point, black women learned about lifestyles. They observed all the details in white households, from furnishings to personal encounter. Um, Taking mental notes, they make judgments about the quality of life they witness, comparing it to black experience. In the confines of segregated black communities, they shared their perception of the white other, the animalistic, radical behaviorist, human nature observing other. Often their accounts were most negative when they described white women. They were able to study them much more consistently than white men were not always present. If the racist white world represented black women as sluts, then black women examined the actions of white women to see if their sexual mores were different. Mores? I honestly don't know what that word is. Sorry, excuse me. I'm gonna grab some water real quick. Right. Often their accounts were most negative when they described white women. They were able to study them much more consistently than white men, who were not always present. The racist white world represented black women as sluts, then black women examined the actions of white women as if their sexual mores were different. Their observations often contradicted stereotypes. Overall, black women have come away from encounters with white women in the servant served relationship feeling confident that the two groups are radically different, share no common language. It is this legacy of attitudes and reflection about white women that is shared from generation to generation, keeping alive the sense of distance and separation, feelings of suspicion and mistrust. That puts people behind. Because what do you do when you enter a world of knowledge and of academia that says that everyone that says everyone, a white person invented this? I guess that's where Yakub comes in, right? Uh, you redefine history to say that it could have been a black person that invented this idea or that came up with this idea, or you highlight aspects of history and a continuity that produces society that does involve non-white people. I suppose that makes sense. You also have a lot of people dropping out of school, or just completely resigning from any sort of peaceful engagement with what they see as white society, which is obviously not good. Now, uh, sounds like I'm doting, like this doesn't happen everywhere. But when you tell Bell Hooks to only talk about what she knows, she's gonna talk about black people. Um, it's not good. This is why it's so important to understand the kind of and I love this term pseudo survival uh in an augmented or sorry pseudo reality an augmented survival. uh it's so important to understand augmented survival, to understand the concept that one's ideas about how to survive are founded on false premises in order to make the claim that these people are inherently different from one another and oftentimes very stupid. Um, I don't think it's a productive mindset. And I think if you put someone through the system, through any system we build today, without the total raising of everything that's been built, which would first of all result in complete ecological collapse, um, is saying that at some point, some idea that might have been inherited from the past came from white society, and so this idea is no good. It's not good. Conversely, we see progressive ideas being put forward about unifying people, um, undoing these sort of old hierarchies in order to uh, make it apparent that we don't rely on the recognition of these powers anymore to produce society or to organize ourselves, to educate ourselves. These progressive ideas um, that come from an overwhelming who come from like uh, these diverse societies uh, in which an overwhelming amount of non-white voices resonate with these progressive ideas that unify society. Pushing back against those because they're non-white ideas is obviously just as bad. And this past-present dichotomy is terrible too because the present becomes the past and the future becomes the present. So Now everything's in the past. Now it's old ideas that are created under these premises, and history becomes this intertwining thing. And then if we go to critically inspect whiteness erases European identity in order to institute some sort of hegemony. So now non-white ideas can be spread by ostensibly white people or people who are white today, and so it just confuses the entire ordeal to base these things off of race. Now, you don't have to say that you're basing it off of race to base it off of race, because it can happen psychologically by viewing yourself as distant, as separate, harboring these feelings of suspicion and mistrust. No one's telling you to do something for no reason, but it's certainly true that these things make it difficult to accept yourself as a part of an integrated process. Um, in a much less human sense, you can think of these as like subject matters. You think of yourself as like a math person, and not a stinky English person with fucking jiggling fat all over themselves and silly ways of speaking. Like my dog started barking too. Like you're not going to be able to see how math is used in sort of like a creative way. You have trouble understanding that like there are ideas in math, high level ideas in math, that rely on this sort of idea that math can be as arbitrarily composed as language, which is not arbitrarily composed, but rather composed according to a syntax. But beyond that, there is a creative element to math. There's a creativity that's involved in unifying these like different subjects and becoming very quick, becoming a fast learner when it comes to these complicated concepts. It separates the number crunchers from the modelers, and there are no more number crunching jobs, believe me. Like, you want to make a difference, you have to be a modeler. You can't just arbitrarily celebrate these, feelings of difference. You really have to have something built up about them, which I guess is the difficulty of these of dealing with these like large scale like crime syndicates who use this sort of division of learning and diversion of labor to uphold these sort of hegemonies. But as soon as there's progress, suddenly people stop filtering to the top. It becomes many hegemonic relationships still coded by race, in which nothing's coming down from this upper class position. So it just becomes classist at the end of the day. And then it regresses. It becomes racist again because it is classist. And, the racist people who were never stopped from being classist get to be racist again to hide their classism. It just keeps going. So it's really not fair to yourself or others to harbor these kinds of feelings, and to not express these things. And it also behooves you to accept that people have these connections in their brains that may or may not result in action. But it's not the thought. You have to understand that it's like these people live in as much of a shroud as you do. And then, you deconstruct hegemony. You do the best you can. Now that interracial relationships between whites and blacks are more common, black women see white women as sexual competitors, irrespective of sexual preference, often advocating continued separation in the private sphere despite proximity and closeness in work setting. Okay. Sorry, I'm still on what I said, and I got to the point where I was like, oh, and calling hits, and then they start talking about women, and I'm like mixing the two ideas in my head. Wait, my eyes. Contemporary discussions of relationships between black women and white women, whether scholarly or personal, rarely take place in integrated settings. White women writing about their impressions in scholarly and hold on, let me read it. White women writing about their impressions in scholarly and confessional work often ignore the depth of enmity between the two groups or see it as solely a black female problem. That's obviously wrong. Uh, it's way deeper than that. Many times in feminist circles, I've heard white women talk about a particular black woman's hostility towards white females as though such feelings are not rooted in historical relations and contemporary interactions. Instead of exploring the reasons such hostility exists or giving it any legitimacy as an appropriate response to domination or exploitation, they see the black woman as being difficult, problematic, irrational, and insane. Until white women can confront their fear and hatred of black women, and vice versa, until we can acknowledge the negative history which shapes and informs our contemporary interaction, there can be no honest, meaningful dialogue between the two groups. Honesty, that's a funny word. You know, I was reading Dopamine Nation. Dr. Anna Lemke, or Anna Lemke, MD, I should say, is talking about, and it's really funny because that book is so good, and there's so many paid negative reviews about it that, like, in newer editions, so in old editions of the book, in the edition that I gave to my friend, that I don't think is in my possession anymore, the front cover only says Anna Lemke, or it says like Dr. Anna Lemke or something like that. And then in newer editions of the book, the cover literally says Anna Lemke MD because of how review bombed that book is. It's so fucking good. It's a revolutionary text. It is the kind of information that will save your life, that could destroy any sort of chains around your mind in regards to your propensity to hold yourself back by being this active consumer and habit former, right? It's a book about forming your own habits. See on the stream, CEOs hate this one simple trick. That's not a joke. They review bomb the hell out of that book. And it's so fucking good. And the only reason I understand what this woman is saying right now without being rich. What is it? Where is it? Where does she say there can be no honest, meaningful dialogue between these two groups? Who cares about honesty, right? Well, it turns out they did some studies. And honesty stimulates the prefrontal cortex. When you're honest, it exercises connections between the hippocampus and the prefrontal cortex that makes recall easier. That makes it easier for you to memorize things and to form meaningful bonds between stimulus and information. Or no, it wasn't a study, but it was like there was a study that suggested that, and then the experts in emails with each other, this is how low-key this information is. The experts in emails to each other simply said that it's highly plausible. But it's just not a matter of study. Because it's such a controversial topic that, like, people will pay to have it hidden. It's so ridiculous. It is so fucking ridiculous. That book is so good. It's crazy to me. This is not psychobabble. This is not random. This is actually the key to life that people will pay to hide from you. Now, is Bell Hooks right? I think there is a lot of truth to what she says. I think she's making a lot of appeals to her peers before getting into the topic, but I think her conclusion holds a lot of weight. The idea of compartmentalizing these histories, and essentially giving up when things are hard is terrible, right? Um, so to use that reasoning would be faulty. If people wanted to legitimate themselves as like a faction, um, go ahead, run and tell that. Go say you're the fucking white supremacist women of America and that you commit corporate fraud and nepotism, and you intentionally uh spread media uh to hold people back, and see how long that lasts. Okay, because it won't. It's already illegal in a large sense. You go out there and say it. These arguments are instrumental to obfuscating this sort of like haze of misdirection that one side will fire at the other. Um and I deplore it. I deplore it in any sort of context. Um it's one thing to say someone's uneducated, uh and to declare yourself as like being against them, but it's another thing to schmooze and then, you know, call someone insane or gaslight them. I'm never one to reject someone's points. Okay? I think it should be apparent that if you're looking at the screen right now that I'm not one who rejects someone's points flippantly. Um like it's just crazy. It's just crazy how much work these people put into destroying society and how often it goes unpunished. Um it's ridiculous. It's so ridiculous. The contemporary feminist call for sisterhood, the radical white woman's appeal to black women and all women of color to join the feminist movement, is seen by many black women as yet another expression of white female denial of the reality of racist domination, of their complicity in the exploitation and holy shit, I can read. Of their complicity in the exploitation and oppression of black women and black people. Though the call for sisterhood was often motivated by a sincere longing to transform the present, expressing white female desire to create a new context for bonding, there was no attempt to acknowledge history or the barriers that might make such bonding difficult, if not impossible. So one side has goons and the other side has no goons. What? What? Who do you think's rejecting feminism? Intelligent people who understand what it's about, or goons? It's goons versus goons. It's those minorities fighting again. Why do you want to join a space where your minority people don't join, don't cooperate with you? What are you going to do? Tell them to be stupid? No. People are coming from that. They couldn't legitimate themselves if they delved back into it. Not until recently. Goons versus goons? Really? Not near the liberatory shit. At least stop distracting people. At least declare yourself. Though the call for sisterhood was often motivated by a sincere longing to transform the present, expressing white female desire to create a context for bonding, there was no attempt to acknowledge history or the barriers that might make such bonding difficult, if not impossible. When black women responded to the evocation of sisterhood based on shared experience by calling attention to both the past of racial domination and its present manifestations in the structure of feminist theory and the feminist movement, white women initially resisted the analysis. They assumed a posture of innocence and denial, a response that evoked memories in black women of negative encounters, the servant-served relationship. Despite flaws and contradictions in her analysis, Adrienne Rich's essay, Disloyal to Civilization, Feminism, Racism, and Gynophobia, was groundbreaking in that it ruptured that wall of denial, addressing the issue of race and accountability. White women were more willing to hear another white woman talk about racism, yet it is their inability to listen to black women that impedes feminist progress. Ironically, many of the black women who were actively engaged with feminist movement were talking about racism in a sincere attempt to create an inclusive movement, one that would bring white and black women together. We believe that true sisterhood could not emerge without radical confrontation, without feminist exploration and discussion of white female racism and black female response. Our desire for an honorable sisterhood, one that would emerge from the willingness of all women to face our histories, was often ignored. Most white women dismissed us as too angry, refusing to reflect critically on the issues raised. By the time white women active in the feminist movement were willing to acknowledge racism accountability and its impact on the relationships between white women and women of color, many black women were devastated. were devastated. Many black women were devastated and worn out. We felt betrayed. White women had not fulfilled the promise of sisterhood. That sense of betrayal continues and is intensified by the apparent abdication of interest in forging sisterhood, even though white women now show interest in racial issues. It seems at times as though white feminists working in the academy have appropriated discussions of race and racism while abandoning the effort to construct a space for sisterhood, a space where they could examine and change attitudes and behavior towards black women and all women of color. I want to say this has changed. Not on the streets. I want to say this has changed, but like anything feminist right now is just completely private and inaccessible because of insane radicals. On the streets, on fucking line, dude. Like it's we've regressed a lot. You can't even openly talk about feminist topics to women who are speaking implicitly for women on, say, like a live streaming website because they want to make money. White live streamers get more views because of the white time investment in the destruction of others. How would I describe this? Like, because there are so many botnets run by like white people and not a lot of interest in doing that, or not as much interest in doing that in non-white communities, probably because the literature is tied up in white hegemony, and the hobby itself has a lot to do with being on a computer, which when you're from like a very turbulent background can have these like deep connotations of like escapism that lend itself to this bad learning environment where like your sort of addictive habits take precedent over like what you're getting into, right? Like in short, like people who are interested in technology experience it in a very addictive way, like either through like video games or like social media, often through like a touch screen. So it doesn't really help them too much when they go to like, say buy server space on like Amazon or something, or like find a server farm in like the UK that will, or in the UK, in the Ukraine, that'll let them like bot like Twitch streams or whatever, or like these people are like Chinese or something like that. Like white streamers get botted more often. There's more of that chicanery going on. And there's like beauty standards and stuff like involved in it, right? Like these are spaces where people are sort of broadcasting live, right? To all these people, but They're either difficult to find or largely defined by this like economic form that promotes white beauty because of its like historical value. Um and no one's talking about this. So if this were to continue forward into the future, who's ahead, right? It's a difficult conversation to have. That being said, there's a lot of integrated programming, but none of it's regulated by the FCC. So it's a lot of people like making fools of themselves and essentially like degrading themselves online in this behavioral futures market that's largely funded, almost exclusively funded, I'd guess, uh, by financial elites who come from these like Eurocentric legacies. Um, so even the people who are like paying to have these algorithms written and paying special attention to like where these intellectuals are coming from to like introduce them to the technology, they're doing so through like the apparatus of like imperialism or like settler colonialism, right? um and so it ends up being a bunch of just like limp-wristed people who kind of defer to the authorities, um and in turn carry out the will of a few white guys with a lot of money. um yeah, I mean, obviously there's like Chinese and you know there's people in oil. There. It's not to say that there are no rich people who aren't white. Um, but that's a discussion of markets that goes beyond the scope of what we're discussing right now. Um, I think you're getting to the point when you start talking about like the military industrial complex and like the dollar oil system and like US interventionism. Um, that obviously very Eurocentric, right? Um, but it's also like not like unfounded to say that like at that point you're talking about something that doesn't make this that changing would not have any potent effect on this like downstream, um because of you know the virtue of like these separations of powers that people are able to agree upon. um So I mean, it's very clear that a lot of white people benefit from these things, and I think there should be able to be a conversation about this. Um, but I don't see how like that's not suddenly everyone's issue. Like it's not like there's no law, there's no law saying that like every stream that isn't a mainstream stream can't be a progressive stream. There's no law against that. There's no law saying you can't do what I'm doing right now, but there's no interest in it. um, which is really frustrating when you're like aware of the issue. So, I mean, what can you do besides stir up interest in it? Um, I know a lot of these like big internet personalities are like managed. And it'd be interesting to know more about these companies that manage them because I would not be surprised if there were conversations being had between streamers and management, especially during the hiring process, that pose the question: will you put forth our status quo enforcing values, which is to say, are you ready to lock in history amidst this racial disparity. And that to me is racist. That to me is carrying out racism. That is carrying out power and prejudice based on racial identity. And so it's I want to say this has changed, but I can't. I really can't. I don't know what to say besides, well, I'm sure in academia, black voices, non-white voices are taken much more seriously. But apparently publishers think it's safe to publish a book like Dopamine Nation, have it reach the top of the New York Times bestseller list, and just like not say anything about that. You can tell people exactly how to resist the entire capitalist machine, starting from uh what is it, like an abstinence first approach. Have it reach the top of the New York Times bestseller list and have it do nothing. So I don't know. Yeah, maybe the academic spaces are integrated now, but it's moved. The authority on these things has moved to the internet, which is so unregulated that I have 2 cameras on right now just to give the modicum of assurance that I'm a real person streaming from my room. I leave my house with my phone on sometimes just to prove I'm a real person sometimes. That's how unregulated the internet is right now. You can't even prove that a person's on camera, like streaming from their fucking home without like serious like forensic like extension of what's happening. Kai Cenat, when he walks around the Kai Cenat estate, is very intentional. That is a very intentional way to film something. Filming all these things at Airbnbs and stuff like that, that's non-repudiation. That's keeping people responsible for what they say. Because when it comes down to it, it's like, okay, well, were you there? Did a camera capture it? Was it recorded? Who recorded it? Who owns this footage? It's like, that's real. And that's something employers are willing to work with. But you look at a VTuber, and that thing is so fucking, that is so fucking illegal in my mind. A VTuber is so illegal in my fucking mind, dude. Those things are risque, dude. They hardly exist. They hardly fucking exist. The fact they get to do anything at all is shocking to me. And I've seen it, it's affected me personally at least. So those spaces largely unbreached as they have absconded to the new internet broadcasting apparatus, which is largely Eurocentric and extremely racist, and demands that of its broadcasters, at least its successful broadcasters. I want to say it's changed, but it hasn't become any more potent. I'll tell you that much. With the increasing institutionalization and professionalization of feminist work focused on the construction of feminist theory and the dissemination of feminist knowledge, white women have assumed positions of power that enable them to reproduce the servant-served paradigm in a radically different context. That has not really changed. Now, black women are placed in the position of serving white female desire to know more about race and racism to master the subject. That's like a decolonization thing. You can be decolonized, but then introduce to this relationship in such a way that like you still uphold these like commodity fetishisms that like are self-destructive. due to your subordination to white culture. Um, Now we can look at the agents of this and we can ask ourselves, well, who's doing anything based on these myths anyway? And the more people who do things based on this myth, the more they're responsible for being a beneficiary of this white culture. The less you act on myth, the less responsible you are. It's not about being white, it's about how much you act on these myths. Now black women are, so I mean, and that's why this whole discussion is very different today, but not different enough to bell hooks. I want to say like bell hooks is contemporary enough that like she should understand that what she's saying is like losing weight. Like it's really like, I think once you hit like 2012, maybe even 2015, you're like at this point where it's like things are getting really diverse in anywhere but where it matters right now. Um there are so many ways to just like put yourself ahead of like all these media machines that this conversation needs to change. We need to start thinking about this very differently. But it's the same relationships deconstructed so that these arguments can be called dated, if that makes sense. Not that much has changed, but enough has changed to reduce the power of this text, the ability of this text to render reality to the reader. Curiously, most white women writing feminist theory that looks at difference and diversity do not make do not oh fuck. Curiously, most white women writing feminist theory that looks at difference and diversity do not make white women's lives, works, and experiences the subject of their analysis of race, but rather focus on black women or women of color. White women who have yet to get a critical handle on the meaning of whiteness in their lives and the representation of whiteness in their literature or the white supremacy that shapes their social status are now explicating blackness without critically questioning whether their work emerges from an aware anti-racist standpoint. Well, yeah, because ethnic studies means not white, basically. I mean, it's not defined as not white, but by the definition given, only non-white people count in like an ethnic studies like academic environment. It's they are racially radical from the norm as it's like presented in society, basically. Um which includes history. So like it's by that virtue that like white European erasure through whiteness has made ethnic studies incapable of addressing these sort of European differences in an American context. Um which sucks, right? Because I've seen plenty of it online. And during Bell Hooks time, it was happening online, so whatever. Drawing on the work of black women, work that they once dismissed as irrelevant, they now reproduce the servant serve paradigms in their scholarship. Armed with new knowledge of race, their willingness to say that their work is coming from a white perspective, usually without explaining what that means, they forget that the very focus on race and racism emerged from the concrete political effort to forge meaningful ties between women of different race and class groups. The struggle is often completely ignored. Content with the appearance of greater receptivity, the production of texts where white women discuss race is given as evidence that there has been a radical shift in direction. White women ignore the relative absence of black women's voices, either in the construction of new feminist theory or at feminist gatherings. Sheesh. Talking with groups of women about whether they thought feminist movement has had a transformative impact on relationships between white and black women, I heard radically different responses. Most white women felt there had been a change, that they were more aware of race and racism, more willing to assume accountability and engage in anti-racist work. Something I hear a lot about when I try to educate someone about something and then ask them to produce anything about it and then go blank. Or just like repeat verbatim what I say without performing any sort of like meaningful synthesis or being on the same page in any way. Black women and women of color were adamant that little had changed, and despite recent white female focus on race, racist domination is still a factor in personal encounters. Isn't that just right? Let me see. Racist domination is still a factor in personal encounters. Okay, can you tell me more about this? Tell me what's going on. They felt that the majority of white women still assert power even as they address issues of race. Assert power. Even as they, as one black woman puts it, it burns me up to be treated like shit by white women who are busy getting their academic recognition, promotions, more money, etc., doing great work on the topic of race. Some black women I spoke with suggested that it was fear that their resources would be appropriated by white women that led them to avoid participating in feminist movement. I don't know, man. That's sounds like they know it. I guess anyone can say that, but it's, I mean, if they can produce it, they can produce it. I mean, that's, you just throw it down. Fear and anger with about appropriation, as well as concern that we not be complicit in reproducing servant-served relationships, have led black women to withdraw from feminist settings where we must have extensive contact with white women. Withdrawal exacerbates the problem. It makes us complicit in a different way. If a journal is doing a special issue on black women studies and only white women submit work, then black women cannot effectively challenge their hegemonic hold on feminist theory. This is only one example of many. Without our voices in written work and in oral presentations, there will be no articulation of our concerns. Where are our books on race and feminism and other aspects of feminist theory, works which offer new approaches and understanding? What do we do to further the development of a more inclusive feminist theory and practice? What do we presume our role to be in the mapping of future direction for feminist movement? Withdrawal is not the answer. Thank you. Even though practically every black woman active in any aspect of feminist movement has a long record of horror stories documenting the insensitivity and racist aggression of individual white women, we can testify as well to those encounters that are positive, that enrich rather than diminish. Granted, such encounters are rare. They tend to take place with white women who are not in positions where they can assert power, which may be why these are seen as exceptional rather than as positive signs indicating the overall potential for growth and change for greater togetherness. Perhaps we need to examine the degree to which white women and all women who assume powerful positions rely on conventional paradigms of domination to reinforce and maintain that power. I wish they'd just put a fucking camera in the classroom. I wish the school would spy on these motherfuckers. I'm tired of having to go word of mouth on this shit. Dead ass. Fuck your privacy, bitch. You lost it. Be a star. Talking with black women and women of color, I wanted to know what factors distinguish these relationships we have with white feminists, which we do not see as exploitative or oppressive. A common response was that these relationships had two important factors: honest confrontation and dialogue about race and reciprocal interaction. Within the servant served paradigm, it is usually white women who are seeking to receive something from black women, even if that something is knowledge about racism. When I asked individual white women who have friendships and positive work relationships with black women in feminist settings what were the conditions enabling reciprocity, they responded by emphasizing that they had not relied on black women to force them to confront their racism. Somehow, assuming responsibility for examining their own responses to race was a precondition for relations on an equal footing. These women felt that these women felt they approached women of color with knowledge about racism, not with guilt, shame, or fear. One white woman said that she starts from the standpoint of accepting and acknowledging that white people always have racist assumptions that we have to deal with. Readiness to deal with these assumptions certainly makes forming ties with non white women easier. She suggests that the degree to which a white woman can accept the truth of racist oppression, of white female complicity, of the privileges white women receive in racist structure, determines the extent to which they can be empathetic with women of color. Empathetic. Like emotional? In conversations, I found that feminist white women from non materially privileged backgrounds often felt their understanding of class difference made it easier for them to hear women of color talk about the impact of race, of domination, without feeling threatened. Personally, I find that many of my deepest friendships and feminist bonds are formed with white women who come from working class backgrounds or who are working class and understand the impact of poverty and deprivation because they have an easier time being empathetic. So you guys end up understanding what points are being recalled more easily. You're more ready to accept what is and isn't important because people have this inherent belief, and maybe this is something that I should deconstruct, really take a critical look at within myself. But people hold this belief that if something is remembered, that means it's incredibly important. But what if like you just remembered all things? What if you just like remembered a whole lot? Like you were just like there for everything, And you go through this struggle and it doesn't mark you as like remarkable. It doesn't mark itself as like remarkable in your mind because it's as remarkable as anything else. Like is that person like as like a non-white feminist, do you think that person and like if you had a conversation with them, do you think that person thinks that what you're saying is as important as you think what you're saying is? As like and let's just to expand the question, if you're like an expert on something, even if it's your own life, say you're telling someone about your day, right? And you have this conversation with someone about something that's really upsetting to you, and their response is to go, "Oh yeah." Where do you go from there? Do you get on their case? Do you say, "What do you mean, oh yeah?" And they tell you everything verbatim that you just said, and they even have something to contribute. Does that annoy you? This is a question. This is a question about what you're willing to internalize, right? How we accept different modes of internalization. Some people come to knowledge. This is my take. Okay, this is from me. Some people come to knowledge from a place of struggle. Some people come to trust from a place of struggle, from a place of means, and all of these things, anything in between, right? All have their own sort of like emotional like connotations, ranges of emotional connotations even. Do you reject someone based on their inability to mimic your emotional connotations? If they can explain to you why you feel a certain way, are you going to hold that person in the same regard as someone who just seems to like click with you? Your answer may be yes, or your answer may be no. You know, you might not hold that person in the same regard. You might not even remember him that well because of how emotionally attached you were to that scenario, right? But how do you remediate that information with the fact that people can just learn psychology? People can learn to emotionally manipulate you or to emotionally mimic you. People can learn all this empathy and nothing about what you say. And they can learn all these ways that people are assuaged during interpersonal contact, that allows them to give you the impression that they care. Wouldn't that feel deceptive? There's a deep conversation going on here. But the answer is really quite simple. We should just accept that people are going to feel differently about things that are important for either party. They're going to act on these things as if they have the same importance, but feel differently about them. To act the same way, despite how you feel, though, is a decision one has to make for themselves. You have to decide that no matter how you feel, you are going to act a certain way about something. Calls into question so much about who we trust and why we trust them, what we trust. It's the reason I'm in these books. Because I need to be able to tell people there is something else. It doesn't have to be about hobbies. It doesn't have to be about, opting to get involved in this aspect of this this subculture, this aspect of this subculture. It could be even more generalized. It could be about the country. It can be about what the democracy around you enables you to do. I like that one. Has a lot to do with teamwork. There's a deep conversation happening here. I implore you to act without bias. Set these things aside so that you can gain a deeper understanding of humanity for the sake of cooperating. Make concessions. Write reminders for yourself. Be ready to explain these things. Maybe this is boring as hell. Maybe this is banal. So obvious that it's just a part of this package deal that you perform constantly. Think less about package deals. Think more about how awkwardness is fine. Whatever it is. People need to change. People need to stop defaulting to this thing where they say they're not a decision maker, because they are. You can decide not to vote. No one's going to arrest you for not voting. A lot of reasons not to. Even if non-participation isn't a reason to not vote, even if counting yourself out is not a good reason to not vote, there are many reasons to not punish someone for not voting. And the act of voting itself doesn't emphasize that one's a decision maker, especially not in today's political climate. So many people feeling disenfranchised, especially with these wealthy, wealthy legacies dominating party politics with this new technological apparatus. I implore you to believe that you are a decision maker. I implore you to believe that you can succeed in education so that those who observe you can believe the same. If anything else, be a good example. We live in an educational crisis in which people's decision rights are taken from them, and this is justified by one's struggle in education. You're not writing the law, you're not writing the code because you struggled to decompartmentalize, because you struggled to dedicate yourself to something that works against you. Maybe you never saw yourself as either of those things, but it's dispossessing your decision rights every day with this technology. If you ever expect that to make sense, if you ever expect any of that to change for the better, you have to be a decision maker. Anyone I'm talking to right now has to be ready to be a decision maker. I'm hoping you're healthy. I'm hoping that you're legally sound in mind or capable of being so. I'm not saying to leave those people behind at all. You gotta love them. But know this, you are a decision maker. Anyone I'm talking to is a decision maker. You have to decide for the best for yourself. You have to decide on the best for yourself. This bias has to change, or people are going to believe that they can't work together. People are going to continue to be split off from each other. Fragmentation in society will continue to be perfected, and any effort to circumvent this multi-$100 billion human control apparatus will be thwarted by people's lack of confidence or lack of understanding. Try to understand. It's important. It's very important. Okay. I talked about writing this essay with a group of white female colleagues, all of them English professors, and they emphasized the fear many privileged white women have of black women. Oh. We all remembered Lillian Hellman's frank comments about her relationship with the black woman servant who was in her employ for many years. Hellman felt that this woman really exercised enormous power over her, admitting that it made her fear all black women. We talked about the fact that many white women fear. We talked about the fact that what many white women fear is being unmasked by black women. One white woman from a working class background pointed out that black women servants witnessed the gap between the white women's words and their deeds, saw contradictions and inadequacies. Perhaps contemporary generations of white women who do not have black servants, who never will, have inherited from their female ancestors the fear that black women have the power to see through their disguises, to see the parts of themselves they want no one to see. Though most of the white women present at this discussion do not have close friendships with black women, they would welcome this opportunity to have more intimate contact. Often black women do not respond to friendly overtures by white women for fear that they will be betrayed, that at some unpredictable moment, the white woman will assert power. Assert power, there it is. Acting on myth. The facade, the disguise is the myth, to assert power is to act on it, right? This fear of betrayal is linked with white female fear of exposure. Clearly, we need feminist psychoanalytic work that examines these feelings and the relational dynamics they produce. I wonder if anyone ever did that. That's a good question. I actually wonder if anyone ever did that. Fear of exposure, of vulnerability, of changing. And this patriarchy, man, makes people afraid of acting. It's crazy. Corporal law, shit like that, or corporal punishment. Terrible thing. Often, black female fear of betrayal is not present when an individual white woman indicates by her actions that she is committed to anti-racist work. For example, I once applied for a job at the Women's Studies program at the White Women's College. The committee reviewing my application was all white, and they let you in? During the review process, one of the reviewers felt that racism was shaping the nature and direction of the discussions, and she intervened. That's good. That helps. Doesn't help me say that the whole thing isn't racist, but it helps put people who can observe these things in a position where they're privileged to receive this knowledge. Hopefully. One gesture of intervention she made was to contact the black woman affirmative action officer so that there would be non-white participation in the discussion. Her commitment to feminist process and anti-racist work informed her actions. And you might be asking yourself, isn't affirmative action unconstitutional? It was agreed upon that affirmative action is unconstitutional. Now, that being said, the Constitution is an incomplete and imperfect document. So it's not to say that that decision cannot be overturned or represents any absolute truths. For example, Roe v. Wade was recently ruled as unconstitutional. It was overturned after so many years because of privacy laws. Roe v. Wade was decided on the basis that one could not simply know why a woman wanted to do what she did with her body. You couldn't know who she was having sex with, or why she got an abortion, or even if she did, because of patient-doctor confidentiality. That's huge, right? That's a large body of legal precedent that says that no matter how someone's observed, according to the law, they have certain rights to do with themselves what they would. Now imagine that you're this like elite who makes all this money when people like do what you want them to, right? Even if that means lying about what they do. That's a lot of the money in tech right now. That's a lot of the lobbying that like Google does to eliminate people's privacy rights so that they can use this information for themselves and no one else. Copyright the means of using this information for themselves and no one else. Keep it as trade secrets for themselves as no one else. Keeping their CEOs evasive using this information so that they can't be investigated very easily. And then using that information to predict the outcomes of people's actions and sell that as advertising space, as algorithmic content. What else are they selling it as? What else have they used this information to research? How much of DeepMind is based on a narrow understanding of humanity, physics, or anything really? We can't know as the public, even if it can gravely affect our lives. And so I don't agree with Roe v. Wade being overturned because it's a bunch of fucking money. So when affirmative action gets overturned because people are saying that free association is impeached or is breached by their requirement to practice affirmative action, I have to wonder what they mean by free association, because it's very clear uh, that constantly playing upon white flight or male flight or whatever kind of flight there is, to create this separation between people, this democratic dysfunction, this societal dysfunction. I can't understand how that doesn't negatively impact the free will of people who rely on these systems to understand who they're governing. Or in the private sector, I don't understand how one can self-regulate if they're constantly practicing free association to avoid anyone negatively affected by what they do. You can always run and you can always lie, are the kinds of rights that these people assert with these Supreme Court decisions. That's how I feel about it. That's why affirmative action is unconstitutional. It's to support white flight. It's to keep these people exclusive so that they can continue to manipulate and transform any individual who attempts to reach this power, to change the world. It's to maintain the status quo. It's to keep you frustrated. She extended herself even though there was no personal gain. Let's face it, opportunism has prevented many academic feminists from taking action that would force them to go against the status quo and take a stand. Her actions confirm for me both the power of solidarity and sisterhood. She did not play it safe. To challenge, she had to separate herself from the power and privilege of the group. One of the most revealing insights she shared was her initial disbelief that white feminists could be so blatantly racist, assuming that everyone in the group shared a common bond in whiteness, the common acceptance that in an all-white group it was fine to talk about black people in stereotypical racist ways. When this process ended, I was offered the job. We talked about her sense that that what she witnessed was white female fear that in the presence of black female power, their authority would be diminished. We talked about ways feelings allow many white women to feel more comfortable than black women who appear victimized or needy. Like with the police. We focused, because white women can just lie to the police. We focused on ways white feminists sometimes patronize black women by assuming that it is understandable if we are not radical. And it's not like it's not like the police officer just loves white women. The law loves white women. The law loves a person who is distressed and incapable of helping themselves, especially in cases of assault. So when hands are put on me, and I'm so well-to-do, when I get sexually assaulted and I go to therapy, the law stops protecting me. It's fucked up. We focus on ways white feminists sometimes patronize black women. What am I supposed to do? Fail the fucking class? Every fucking day. I wish I could just fucking eliminate him, dude. And I would dissociate during class, dude. Every fucking day. I just wanted him out. So fucking out. But my schedule was fucking tight, dude. I was on 20 units. Because I'm at a fucking community college and I have to show some fucking academic rigor. I have to flex my backbones. So fucking ridiculous. We focus on ways white feminists sometimes patronize black women by assuming that it is understandable if we are not radical, if our work on gender does not have a feminist standpoint. We focused on ways white feminists sometimes patronize black women by assuming that it is understandable if we are not radical. We focused on ways white feminists sometimes patronize black women by assuming that it is understandable if we are not radical, if our work on gender does not have a feminist standpoint. This condescension further estranges black and white women. It is an expression of racism. Oh, they're saying they're not real feminists. I'm like, I'm reading this and I'm like, what the fuck did you just say to me? Jesus. Now that many white women engaged in feminist thinking and practice no longer deny the impact of race on the construction of gender identity, the oppressive aspects of racial domination and white female complicity, it is time to move on to an exploration of the particular fears that inhibit meaningful bonding with black women. It's time for us to create new models for interaction that take us beyond the servant served encounter, ways of being that promote respect and reconciliation. Concurrently, black women need to explore our collective attachment to rage and hostility towards white women. It may be necessary for us to have spaces where some of that repressed anger and hostility can be openly expressed so that we can trace its roots, understand it, and examine possibilities for transforming internalized anger into constructive, self affirming energy we can use effectively to resist white female domination and forge meaningful ties with white female allies. Only when our vision is clear will we be able to distinguish sincere gestures of solidarity from actions rooted in bad faith. It may very well be that some black female rage towards white women masks sorrow and pain, anguish that has been so difficult to make contact, uh, to impress upon their consciousness our subjectivity. Letting go of some of the hurt may create a space for courageous contact without fear or blame. If well, you need a good reason, don't you? Uh, if black women and white, like, if you're gonna build up life as like this like decompartmentalized thing, you want to see things as they relate to each other. You have to relate things to each other, right? There has to be some amount of continuity that allows you to recall these things and to link these ideas together, right? So, if letting go of the hurt becomes some form of dissociation, if letting go of the hurt is simply forgetting that it happened, then you're internalizing a continuity that begs you to forget. I, I find that to be offensive. I don't think you can meaningfully direct group action if you do not acknowledge and move forward from what causes pain, if these processes are cyclical. If there is something that causes these interactions to reemerge, these hierarchies to reemerge in society, and they cause dysfunction on the magnitude of years, setting people back and making it hard to create positive change, or make it hard to justify change that helps many people without necessarily having been defined in the past as a necessary power, while white patriarchy or just whiteness in general seem to be the law of the land. You're going to continue to be a dysfunctional society. You're going to continue to support a dysfunctional society, and you're ultimately estranging yourself from incredibly intelligent people who see through that and would just rather not deal with it. By virtue of uh, needing some sort of successor, you know, I if this is gonna define the division between people, like what people choose to forget, then we definitely need to remedy this crisis, because no one is gonna be fully qualified to hold any sort of seat of power uh for a period of time that goes uninterrupted without some sort of conflict of interest or some sort of social, like societal dysfunction to replicate itself. You're never going to be able to regulate anything that can truly hurt people properly without running the risk of allowing nukes or AI, hacking, biological weapons, prions, whatever the fuck it is, to cause grave damage on scales that people cannot recover from. The ecological damage that can be done in that period of time is ridiculous. So sure, okay, set aside the pain. Don't act like you're not going to get taken out for it. Don't act like you're not unqualified. You know? That is the issue. That is such an issue. And I take issue with that. Okay? Because if I go to hire someone, all right, and they go through 90 days before they choose to forget, I'm fucked. Okay? That's a real simple scenario, isn't it? So why the fuck do I want you around? So yeah, I'm gonna check for it. Go back to school. If black women and white women continue to express fear and rage without a commitment to move on through these emotions in order to explore new grounds for contact, our efforts to build an inclusive feminist movement will fail. Much depends on the strength of our commitment to feminist process and feminist movement. There have been so many feminist occasions where differences surface, and with them expressions of pain, rage, hostility. Rather than coping with these emotions and continuing to probe intellectually and search for insight and strategies of confrontation, all avenues for discussions become blocked and no dialogue occurs. I am confident that women have the skills developed in interpersonal relations where we confront gender differences to make productive space for critical dissent dialogue even as we express intense emotions. We need to examine why we suddenly lose the capacity to exercise skill and care when we confront one another across race and class differences. It may be that we give up so easily with one another because women have internalized the racist assumption that we can never overcome the barrier separating white women and black women. If this is so, then we are seriously complicit. To counter this complicity, we must have more written work and oral testimony documenting ways barriers are broken down, coalitions formed, and solidarity shared. It is this evidence that will renew our hope and provide strategies and direction for future feminist movement. Producing this work is not the exclusive task of white or black women. It is collective work. The presence of racism in feminist settings does not exempt black women or women of color from actively participating in the effort to find ways to communicate, to exchange ideas, to have fierce debate. If revitalized feminist movement is to have transformative impact on women, then creating a context where we can engage open critical dialogue with one another, where we can debate and discuss without fear of emotional collapse, where we can hear and know one another in the difference and complexities of our experience is essential. Collective feminist movement cannot go forward if this step is never taken. When we create this women's space where we can value difference and complexity, sisterhood based on political solidarity will emerge. I feel like I really want to read Friere before proceeding with the rest of this book. Thank you for coming to the stream. See ya.